Welcome to the Sportsmen's Voice podcast, your inside connection to outdoor legislation. From the Beltway to policy happening your way, we're covering it all. I'm your host, Fred Bird. Join us as we explore public land access, wildlife and fisheries management, Second Amendment rights, the triumphs that shape our nation, the sports we all love, and the stories that fuel our passion for the great outdoors. This is the Sportsmen's Voice podcast. That's right, this is the Sportsman's Voice podcast. I am your host, Fred Bird. Thanks so much for tuning in. Before we get to this week's guest, let us check in on the stories happening across the nation with this week's TSV Roundup. Welcome back, everybody, to this first TSV Roundup of 2024. It's a new year, and we're going to get into it by going back in time a little bit, catch up on happenings around the country while we were away as it pertains to the TSV Roundups, a couple special edition episodes. At the end of last year, let's catch up on things that were going on here in December. A second ballot initiative has been filed in the ongoing attempts to ban hunting on Colorado's mountain lions and bobcats. Let's see here. This was originally Initiative 91. There's now Initiative 101. And what does that mean going forward? So the goal is still the same. But after receiving an unfavorable ruling at the Colorado Title Board, which resulted in the removal of the words trophy hunting from the opposition's proposed title for Initiative 91, as well as elements of the measure being contested in the Colorado Supreme Court, the opposition responded by authoring a new and more cleverly written ballot initiative, Initiative 101. The goal, as stated here a second ago, of 101 is the same as 91, to ban mountain lion hunting and bobcats and lynx for good measure. Initiative 101 purposefully avoid some of the pitfalls in the initial attempt, many of which resulted in the first effort being challenged. It's clear that the forces behind Initiative 101 are very serious about seeing this through to the ballot and winning their cause. As we covered this, I think back in November, change the title, call it something different. The goal remains the same. So you folks in Colorado, get on it. Be aware. Activate your community, and advocate for science-based management, not this emotional argument and assigning special treatment of aesthetically pleasing fur bearers or other managed species just because. Just because. Good luck in Colorado. Let's head down in the Mid-Atlantic. My colleague there, Kaylee Leager, she was able to present Executive Council member, State Senator Jack Bailey, an award at the 20th Annual NASC Sportsmen Legislator Summit. Senator Bailey was a co-sponsor on Senate Bill 327, which created access to additional funding to be used by the general public for hunting, established a fund for R3 programs, established a Sitka deer conservation stamp, increased hunting license fees to expand wildlife management and access. The legislation passed both chambers with bipartisan support and was signed into law by Governor Wes Moore on May 8th of 2023 and took effect on July 1 of the same year. Senator Bailey also authored and introduced Maryland Senate Bill 422, which created a special non-lapsing fund to further manage black bass, large and smallmouth bass. That also includes voluntary donations. The legislation passed both chambers unanimously. It was signed into law by the governor of Maryland, Governor Wes Moore, in May and then took effect in October of 2023. One more highlight for Senator Bailey is he introduced Senate Bill 10, which requires the Maryland DNR to create digital hunting licenses with certain digital stamps and permits. The legislation passed both chambers unanimously and was signed into law by the governor on May 8th and will take effect on July 1st of this very new year, 2024. It was great to see Senator Bailey and Kaylee share the stage, present that award at what was a very successful NASC summit down there in Dewey Beach, Delaware. Like you've heard for the last couple episodes, there's great enthusiasm and energy coming out of that event. So, certainly didn't slow down there. It was a well-deserved honor. Going down to Virginia, a couple new Sportsmen caucus leaders added. So in December, Delegate Betsy Carr and Delegate Buddy Fowler were confirmed as new co-chairs of the Virginia Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus. Delegate Carr and Delegate Fowler take over the leadership positions on the caucus from Delegate James Edmonds and Senator Emmett Henger, who did not seek re-election in 2023. Delegate Carr, a Democrat, and Delegate Fowler, a Republican, will lead the meetings and guide policy priorities for the bipartisan bicameral caucus. CSF would like to extend our sincere gratitude to Delegate Edmonds and Senator Hanger, for their years of leadership and outstanding service to the sportsmen and women of the Commonwealth. Welcome aboard to the two new co-chairs. It looks like Virginia is anticipating a very busy legislative session, as most of us are. Some anticipated legislation in the new year are going to be around MSRs, suppressors, Menhaden management, predator hunting, hunting with hounds, trapping, knife definitions, sportsmen's access, and conservation funding. So having that new leadership in place will certainly help CSF's cause, and certainly our team on the ground there in Virginia looks forward to working with the caucus and conservation partners to ensure the voice of Virginia sportsmen and women are well represented at the State House. Heading over to Oklahoma, the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife and Conservation recently proposed a regulatory change to expand the use of the state's into the state's muzzleloader season for arrow shooting air guns. Certainly no lack of controversy within our space, but the interesting wrinkle here is that Oklahoma is putting this in their muzzleloader season, primitive type season. So certainly no affront to your traditional bow hunters, up and down tackle, and so on. The arrow shooting guns were legalized during Oklahoma's firearm deer season, thanks to the Oklahoma Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus in 2022. Since that time, there's been calls for expanded use of arrow shooting air guns during other deer hunting seasons, recognizing that arrow shooting air guns are not archery equipment. The staff at the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation balanced these calls with the need to protect the integrity of our outdoor sporting heritage by proposing the regulation changes that would allow the arrow shooting air guns to be used during Oklahoma's muzzleloader season. I think everyone wins. What's neat of note here, what Oklahoma also did here, is they instituted a one-time stamp to be able to use this equipment, because currently these arrow guns are not subject to the same excise taxes on other hunting equipment. So by having the stamp in place, still able to fund conservation efforts and not lack on those much needed PR dollars that so many states that we all depend on. For additional information on air guns and arrow shooting air guns, you can visit our CSF issue brief on our website and learn more there. Lastly, let's go up to my area of the country, the Northeast. The last 2 states with outright Sunday hunting prohibitions see cautious optimism. And I say cautious, I stress that. So, a couple of things at play here. Massachusetts and Maine are the only 2 states that remain completely shut off to any sort of Sunday hunting, right? So, late last year, we, CSF, submitted testimony in support of a suite of House and Senate bills that's sent to the Massachusetts Joint Committee on Environmental and Natural Resources. Many of these attempted to offer compromise, getting some rollbacks for Sunday hunting. Some of them were specific to the deer season, using archery equipment, and so on. There's a lot of opportunity here to have that bipartisan support for everyone to kind of come to the table. There was some distance restrictions that were getting. Well, it's coming to me here. They were going to allow archers, from elevated platforms, shorter distance restrictions, and then that played into some Sunday hunting opportunities. There's a ton going on in Massachusetts, and this all came on the heels of the firearm hearing, the anti-firearm hearing that was held right after Thanksgiving holiday, and then the next day they had what they termed Wildlife Day or something to that effect. And it was an all-day marathon hearing on all these bills important to the sporting community of Massachusetts. Many of them, I will say, were positive. I mean, again, highlighting these ones here with the opportunity to bring some sort of Sunday hunting to the table. There were a couple that outright repealed the ban on Sunday hunting. So we're waiting in this new legislative session to hopefully get some traction on this and get some results out of this. But we did engage on that late last year. And then in Maine, you have the passage of the Food Sovereignty Act. Now, that amended the state constitution of Maine. And it's been challenged at the state Supreme Court. And mid-fall, the state Supreme Court went on a tour of Maine, different high schools, and a lot of youngsters got to see civics in action as the court discussed certain cases. And among those was a challenge brought about by Virginia and Joel Parker of Redfield, Maine. And basically that was saying that with the amendment to the Maine state constitution with the Food Sovereignty Act, that a prohibition on Sunday hunting limits the ability for subsistence hunting. So there was a dialogue there, and then the court kicked it around and had good arguments on it. And again, hoping here in the first quarter of this new year to gauge if, they said a decision's forthcoming. We anticipate that coming, I hope, here in the next couple months. But as soon as we find out more on that, we will update that. But again, cautious optimism here in the Northeast, hoping something moves on both of these. It would be great to see at least one of these states come through and create more opportunity for their citizens. With that wraps up the first TSV roundup of 2024. Let's get into this week's show. Stand by. All right, on this first edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast in 2024, we're going to, again, hang out back at our NASC Summit towards the end of 2023. Again, I've told y'all we got so much great content, so many worthwhile conversations we want to bring to you. So we're going to kick this year off with a special sit-down that we did with our Executive Council President and past presidents for the National Assembly Sportsmen's Caucuses. We're going to bring you through the history of NASC. And it's pretty awesome. I mean, what started so many years ago as an idea, 50 states now have Sportsmen's Caucuses under the NASC network. And all 50 of them, as you've heard in the last couple episodes were represented in Dewey Beach, Delaware. It's fantastic, and this is powerful. This is a powerful voice for sportsmen and women all across this country, across the ocean to Hawaii, and then up the west coast of Alaska. Huge, huge deal. We're going to be joined by Senator Robin Webb, Brian White out of South Carolina, Senator Webb out of Kentucky, and then current Executive Council President from my home state of New Hampshire, Representative Jeff Goley. I'm going to get y'all a history lesson on NASC. Again, the genesis of it, the initial aspirations, present day, and then some goals and aspirations for the future. And I will tell you, I come away from that summit enthusiastic, reinvigorated to see folks in positions of leadership that are able to affect change and excited to work with our team and our partners. It's a big deal. So let's sit down with Senator Webb, Rep. Goley, Mr. White. Let's go.
Tell where you're from. Can't hide yours, man.
Well, very well. Well, we have the pleasure of being joined by two of our past Executive Council presidents and current Executive Council President Jeff Goley, Brian White of South Carolina, and Senator Robin Webb of Kentucky. Thank you all so much. It's been a busy day, and I appreciate you guys taking some of your personal time to join us for this EC President's Roundtable.
Thanks for having us.
Yep. How are we finding the summit thus far? First real day of getting into it.
I think it was tremendous. I mean, to start off the morning having the chair of the board of Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, Richard Childress, on hand and speaking to the caucus was a great treat. I mean, it was an honor to have him here and attending the summit.
And it's the second largest in number of attendees and states represented. And we're competing, with not only the holidays, but the Council of State Governments meeting in North Carolina. And it's a busy time of year. And this is a great venue, a little windy, but we've got a good crowd and good national representation.
Yeah, I know all 50 states represented here this week. And what did they say? 16 state agencies are here on hand?
16 state agencies and 8 directors, I believe.
Yeah, that's great. That's real good. So we're able to, have this focused, quiet time to work with state legislators, directors of agencies, and just really have those candid conversations and work to get stuff done as we get into 2024. So it's a great opportunity, and I'm glad we're all here. So at this roundtable, my goal here was to kind of let our audience know, our TSV audience, understand how the NASC became what it is and where it came from and where we are presently today, and then your experiences as EC presidents.
I would defer to Senator Webb as to how it started, as she was right here when it all began.
It started with the Vitla Vision, a couple of folks sitting around, and of course, having the success of the relatively newly minted Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus and Foundation, and they saw the need to perhaps have a little sibling with the states, and I know there was a couple meetings, and then I guess the first organized official meeting was in Texas. I was happy to be a part of that, along with the first president, President John Assel from Maryland. And we had a core group of just a few states and big dreams of having all 50. And it's taken us a while to achieve that, but it certainly was a vision. And based on the success of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, which is the largest, nonpartisan, I'd rather say non than bipartisan because it's really nonpartisan.
I would agree.
And I think that was certainly what started it, and the leadership of Jeff Crane and Brad Rouse and others that were involved at that time. So we're very happy to have been a part of that. And it looks like I'm the elder stateswoman here or something with this cruise.
Mr. White, how was your experience? What was your tenure like, and when was it?
It was good. A couple of years ago, I served on the EC for I can't remember how long, but president for 2 years. And just like Robin said, just watching all this stuff from where it was to where it is today, watching it grow has been fascinating because there's really not a lot of places. We do a lot of the other type conferences and everything else as far as elected officials go, but this is one where you actually have the state agencies that are here, and some of the directors, they get to share in their thoughts on outdoor issues. You have the legislators that make policy that affects it as well, and then you have the industry partners are also here.
Mhm.
So then you get they get to say their say on kind of the effects and have some input in a relaxed, casual setting, like you wouldn't have to come do be sorted for testimony or
Right.
anything else. You can just get together and share ideas, and that's what I've always enjoyed about it. And I think it's very important, and obviously others do too, because it's grown to where it is because of that.
We drive leadership staff crazy, but the sidebars that occur after the meetings and around the meetings are sometimes very important. These guests that have to go in and out, and there's just a lot of networking and relationships that are formed because of having people, like-minded individuals, focusing on issues that they are passionate about.
You mentioned that, you guys, when you first started out and started organizing, the big goal was to eventually get where we're at with all 50 states. But in them first years, what were some of the aspirations and really moving it forward that, got people excited about it and recruited?
When you're a legislator, and especially like us, part-time legislators that have a full obligations, whether it's budget. Brian was chair of A&R committee. I was vice chair of A&R committee. I mean, other things consume your time so much, and we weren't an anomaly there. But just getting people aware that we existed, and getting them to come together as a caucus, reaching out to the non-traditional sportsmen and women in our caucuses to try to have diversity and opportunities for them to hold a rod and a reel, or a firearm in their hand. And those were some challenges. Then you have, the natural barriers of time, scheduling, and creating something new in a pretty predictable environment of your state legislatures with your existing committees and task forces and things, and to bring that in, to get funding, to build alliances with not only your departments. Sometimes they were a little territorial in the beginning. They questioned our motives. They didn't like the legislative, their executive branch function and our legislative branch function. There was some apprehension there. So we had to build those bridges. So, and then the public and some of the stakeholders, bringing those folks together was not always easy, and in different varied interests, just like, running a department or running legislation now. But those are some of the challenges. And then some states, you had a huge anti-use, anti-hunting, fishing contingencies and presence there from a lobby standpoint. So we were also fighting some of that.
I will say some of the states, as we're working on the 50 states and going about reaching out and making our, some of us here, we traveled from state to state trying to bring these states on. I was fortunate enough to go with Brent Miller down to Rhode Island and meet down there we get to meet with both leaders in the House, the Democrat minority leader, majority leader, and we actually even got to meet in the Speaker's office, talk to the Speaker about the caucus. And one of the challenging things you find out when you're looking at this is each state is different on how they recognize caucuses and how their bylaws have to go and what they do. So that was very challenging as to how you went about and did it. Some had to be recognized by the House and the Senate themselves. Some had to be recognized by the Speaker, by leadership, whether it was formal, informal. So that was challenging in getting the 50 states. That was my experience. It was fun to go down there, and finally, when they signed on, it was a little lift off your chest.
Yeah.
We accomplished that.
Ours was created in statute, and I would recommend that for any state that can do that and get that pulled off, because then it's a statutory caucus. It's not can come and go at just a whim of a particular leader or
that we were the same way. And another one that, once you get a state's leadership, I guess, convinced that they need a sportsman's caucus, because some of them are like, well, why do we need one? We don't have any problems.
Yeah.
I don't know why we need to do that. Once they get over that and have an aha moment, oh, this is bigger, because you've got the conservation, because being antis, they can be either good or bad in the conservation community. And then realizing that, okay, well, maybe we do need a organization like this to help us. Once you do that and you get them to one of these meetings, they're hooked. I mean, it's done. It sells itself. So it's an easy sell if you can get them there and get them convinced that, hey, maybe we do need to have this in our state.
Yeah. Oftentimes when you have organizations and groups like this, the individual is motivated by something. Something is either stood out in your life, or just there's this internal thing. I have to be involved in this because I care about X. What was your moment, each of you, that came to you that said, this happened, and because of it, I need to be involved with this? I'll start with you, Senator Webb.
Well, I grew up in it. My father served under 8 or 9 governors as our district fish and wildlife commissioner. I was going to sportsmen's meetings and events from the time I could talk and walk. And it's kind of a legacy thing with me. And you heard that a lot today with the people that are running for office here. And other than the legacy part of it, it's I was exposed to hunting, fishing at a very early age, and that's where I feel more at peace, and that's where I feel closer to God, and I feel like I belong.
Mhm.
And I think that motivates it. Whatever your passion is or your favorite thing to do, I think you feel that our culture is changing and the demographics changing. The generation away from the farm and the field is something that we've got to pay attention to if we want to keep and preserve our present model of funding and the opportunities we have now. And that kind of ties in also to the legacy part of it.
Uh-huh.
I look at New Hampshire joined early on. I believe 2006 we became part of the organization, and from there I became co-chair back in 2011. And looking at why we do it in New Hampshire, New Hampshire House is 400 members, and you look at the makeup of the House in New Hampshire, and you look around. And it's a true volunteer legislature. We get paid $100 a year, and the majority of the people in the House don't hunt or fish.
No.
And it's important to reach out to those individuals, and the only way you can do it is through an organization like this. Form a caucus, have your co-chairs, so you can get your message across to the rest of your seatmates in the House. And it's been beneficial. We've had a lot of folks join that don't hunt, don't fish, but are passionate, and they like learning about what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's perfect. It's a lot of what my aha moment was. Whenever I joined, I grew up hunting and fishing. I grew up on the lake, and my Saturdays were spent behind a bird dog growing up, and that doesn't exist much anymore. All our quail are gone in South Carolina for the most part, unless you have the putouts, and that's just not quail hunting. And seeing what we were doing in the legislature with other things, as far as a lot of the conservationists putting land aside, but wasn't allowing the public to have access. If you don't have access, we can't do the things we like to do.
That's right.
So mine came in behind a lot of, we need access. We need more public lands. It needs to be affordable. And that's part of the problem you have now. And some of these folks coming in, want to change different ammunitions to make it more expensive. So it drives people out. But we get the opportunity as members of Sportsmen's Caucus to really dig down a little deeper in the issues and get the industry on our side. And you come back with, knowledge and some backup. You're not just making stuff up, which sometimes happens in politics. So then you can explain, well, you understand the taxes that are associated with this. You understand the jobs that are associated with this. So, you may be recruiting a manufacturing company. Well, you might want to recruit 3 more because you're about to put these out. And when you put these out, then you got to make up for somewhere to do things. So I like it for that reason. You can tie all that together and explain it little bit better to show them, the benefits of a sportsman's caucus, the benefits of being outdoors. I mean, South Carolina, I think we got 27 boat manufacturers.
Wow.
Just boats. So a lot of people say, well, I like to go out on the water. Well, okay, well, how about fishing? Well, yeah, I like to fish too. Well, here's all your taxes.
Yep.
Here's where it goes. Here's what's happening. You're like, oh, wow. I didn't realize that. So you get the educational component Jeff talked about. You get to educate people, not only legislators, but the general public about how important this is and what the real meaning is. It's not just a bunch of people in camo out there with guns, trying to kill stuff. And that's why I had one lady says, all y'all do is murder those poor animals. I said, ma'am, no, we don't. We're probably the most ethical people as far as taking animals that you want to have. People that actually murder them, the ones that run over in a car and leave them laying there. I said, so you got some issues. I said, so I'd rather have harvested the right way and feed my family than do it another way.
Yeah, sure. I want to come back to the funding conversation because I think it's an important one to have and to hear your perspectives. But I want to quickly get to and have you all expound on this, the strength. This podcast audience has heard me say it every episode and will continue throughout this week. The strength of this organization is, how did you term it, Senator Webb? Not bipartisan?
It's nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan.
It's subject matter oriented. And then all the incidentals that flow from the subject matter of hunting, fishing, license sales, trapping, because there are much incidental bases that you get, whether it's bird watching, to kayaking, to sightseeing, to elk viewing. All of those things come back to actual licenses, which is funding. But certainly, that's a component. And, you just can't take anything for granted. Those of us in the South, as Brian alluded to, we don't have a problem. We do what we want. We got the right to hunt and fish. And then you start seeing that eroded by seemingly innocuous bills about dogs or about ammunition or about access. And, this organization is an educational tool.
Yeah. And because of everyone being able to come together and put R's, D's, I's, L's aside and just focus on the passion that we all share. It's why it works. It's why we're the biggest caucus going and have the most people.
And add to that, I hate to interject, but it's so important because what we see in our respective sportsmen's caucuses are those relationships and nonpartisan, bipartisan conversations and getting to know your colleagues the way it used to be before politics got so divisive, that we work together on other issues. There is a positive spillover in governance overall because of this caucus.
100%. And, I have remarked, and Representative Goley's heard me say this too, that it would not be a terrible strategy for someone looking to get elected or for re-election to engage the sporting community. Because of that ability to all speak the same language, and it bridges those gaps and takes away the divisiveness. Even, I'm a New Hampshire resident too, so when I say back home, when you just go back home and you talk to someone that's a Democrat, a liberal, and you find out that they hunt or they fish or they recreationally shoot, like a lot of people are like, holy smokes, you're a white whale. Well, actually, they're not. And all the ancillary stuff be damned. Focus on what we get, and we do so much. And imagine people sitting down, having a drink together, being friends.
There is no R&D in this.
Exactly right.
Just O's outdoors.
Yes. That needs to be a T-shirt. I'm gonna run that through development. I'll make that T-shirt.
And that's what we are here for. Is everything we do is about the outdoors. Mm-hmm. And like you said, you'll find out the icebreakers from somebody's like, oh, you like to fish? Yeah, we got something in common.
Yeah. And we can build off that. You get a lot of stuff done off of that. I have some very dear friends that are 180 degrees different from me, but we don't focus on that. We talk about their bird dogs and chasing woodcock in New Hampshire, or, running hounds for bear, in Maine. But these are things that it's you hear it all the time, but here's things we used to do. We used to be able to sit down at a table like we are and just talk as human beings, as neighbors. There wasn't this hyper focus on labels.
Civil discourse, is something that, and I always refer back to even the Constitution. short of dueling, I mean, it was pretty contentious.
Yeah.
Those guys ended up reaching a compromise, which was not a bad word because that great experiment's worked for over 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, if there's a value in being able to have civil discourse, whether you agree or not.
Oh, because we all bring something to the table. Just because we've got the horse blinders on and think one certain way, there's so much value in hearing a new idea, whether you think you like it or not right away, sitting on it, and you can come up, like you said, compromise. You come up with a really good idea. I want to go back to the funding talking point because I think that's one of the most understated and least told stories that as an entire community. So all the species-specific groups, the 2A groups, we do a terrible job historically of telling this story. And you guys started naming them off: Pittman Robinson, Dingle Johnson, these funding mechanisms that we, the sporting community, raised our hand almost 100 years ago on one of them and said, we'll sport the load. We'll put it on our back and do it because we see the value. And because of the turn of the century, almost every species was extrapolated from the landscape, except South Carolina. You guys still have the turkey, thank goodness. And marking hunting was put to bed, and leadership saw like, we're doing a terrible thing. And we took that forward and said, okay, even though we're one of the smallest constituencies, we have a funding mechanism and we're happy to do it. Fast forward, again, almost 100 years, here we are, and no one knows this story except us because we talk about it together, but getting it out there to the general public, or even in your caucuses when you recruit new people that aren't sportsmen and women, that's one heck of a thing to lead off with.
And you look at it, and that's, a huge issue because you want to talk about land conservation and where the money's coming from for the state agencies to go out and purchase those pieces of property to put in conservation. And that's not just for sporting. That's for your bird watchers, your animal watchers. That's open land for the public. And that's coming out of dollars and cents from us, from our constituent, from our anglers, hunters, and those folks. And most people don't understand that.
But historically, I think there's a reason for that not being talked about a lot. Because you when you deal with money in like the state budget or federal budget, it's a good, well-kept kind of secret. It's our thing. We don't want to advertise it too much because then everybody will be wanting a piece of it. And I think that could be part of where we are. But, it does need to be told as the demographic shifts because it reaches far more people than just hunters and anglers. And more important than to me than the funding model is the North American model. Mm-hmm. And if we don't start telling that story, you have certain ideologies now that we're seeing, and even in Kentucky, that don't think you think you should hunt and fish and don't value the contribution that licenses make. I mean, we don't have general fund dollars going into our agency. It's a license base and tax base. And we can't support that North American model without these funding mechanisms. And without the North American model, it didn't work out too well. Like you said, we had species annihilation. So those stories have to be told together.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
And I think that's an important point, Robin, when you said that. A lot of states, especially New Hampshire as well, don't receive general fund money from the federal government. It's all on licensing.
But if, and to your earlier point, if it's a kept secret, but if any entity in your local state government tried to defer any of that money, then it's an automatic exemption, and no one would get that. So they couldn't pilfer that fund. It is very specific for its use and its intended distribution.
From trying, I've been doing this.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they've
been doing this 25 years. And every time the state hits a rough spot, here I am, that mitigation money or fees in lieu of money or federal money somewhere, and you have to go tell them and make the case. I mean, people don't understand. Even people serving in those capacities don't understand the fund and the nexus to everything else.
Representative Goley will tell you, even our little agency, they stick their hand in that cookie jar quite a bit. It's like, you can't have that.
And I think this is a good segue to go into, while states like to exempt individuals for licensing, we're starting to hear about the ramifications of having free licenses. because we know all that federal money comes on how many license sales you have in a year. When you can't account for those free licenses, you're losing out on a lot of money.
That's right. That's a great
And
point.
people look at us as legislators when we say we want to charge a fee for a certain group of individuals and no longer give a free license. We come out as the bad apples.
Right.
But in return, we're trying to get 3, 4, 5 to 1 matching funds from the federal government back to the agencies. And it's not doing a disservice to those groups of individuals. It's actually doing a big service to those folks, getting these matching funds to help out.
Yeah, you're right, and it's always a push from some group. Once the doors open, they all come running through. They all have their cause, and then you're the bad guy if you don't do it. It's like all the senior citizens that they say, "Well, we're on a fixed income." I'm like, "Yeah, I wish I were." I'm in sales. So it's I'd love to have a fixed income. So it's to that point. You got to learn to plan and budget and do things. But it's like like Jeff said, everybody seems to want a free license. And nothing is free in this world.
No.
It has a cost, maybe not to you, but it has a cost on the mission of the outdoors. And like in South Carolina, a lot of what we need to start consider is different states are now putting these conservation lands back. We spend more for a conservation bank to take lands off public access or private ownership than we fund our Department of Natural Resources.
Wow.
So it's a little bass-ackwards
Yeah.
doing. And things are beginning to happen like that because you have those folks that never hunted, they didn't fish, but they think, oh gosh, we got to save the green space.
Right.
We'll take better care of your green space than, some of these other groups.
Yeah.
And allow people to come on it, and we can manage it. We can do the things we need to versus just letting it sit there.
What?
That's very important to have a good management plan. And I think that's something that I think this organization eventually get into is bring in management groups to talk to us about how important that is. We have some groups come in and talk, but that's where we have to get to this younger generation. And I think the collegiate group is fairly important. Hard to get off the ground.
It's getting there.
I've been working with a little technical college in South Carolina. I don't know if Isabella mentioned that this morning or not, but oh my heavens, to get a meeting with, folks within the higher ed community to find someone to be a sponsor. Well, it's worse than government. I pass bills a whole lot easier than these things. So it's very frustrating, but I like the community college side. I told little Isabella that it's like these folks are going to stay here. Everybody at Clemson or USC or Kentucky or New Hampshire, they're going to graduate, probably go somewhere else.
And they do, and with UNH, it's too competitive.
We can focus on this little smaller group, and I love this little college is the only one that basically I think that I know of that you bring a gun on campus because we have a gunsmithing school. So it's pretty rare people come in from all over. It's like, okay, we're out we got more trees than people in our area. So it's those kind of things we got to work on, but it's just, you got to be persistent. You can't give up. It's almost like getting the states on, once you get them to the table, you got them, but it takes a lot of work to get them to.
Getting back to your reimbursement topic, we have at CSF, we have modeling, we have model language, we have a solve for that. So if a legislator is hearing this podcast and you're very curious about that, we can certainly help and engage on that and provide for that solve. Because, like you said, to all three of your point, no one likes to hear that a legislator turned down veteran free licenses. There's this terrible PR, and there's no way you can step out of that hole. But again, with education and an alternative, to fund that, yeah, there's a possibility there. I want to ask y'all individually, during your tenure as Executive Council President for NASC, do you have one or two wins, goals that you had that came to fruition, or maybe a surprise that just came about that you can look back on and really champion?
We've had a lot of successes, and it's hard to just and when you've been doing it as long as I have, like 20 years, it all runs together. I don't remember if we did things when I was president or not, but we've done a lot.
Maybe better. Let's qualify. Let's not make it so dialed in. Is there just one or two that really stand out to you over your tenure?
Keeping me involved for helping my state, I'm going to be a little selfish and say, our elk project, and we just acquired thousands of acres with Virginia and Tennessee to do a major project. And I was there when I was not yet very young legislator, turning elk out, the first ones out, their little wobbly legs and crates. And now we've got populations, we've got tag sales, we've got a herd, and we've got an expansion. So keeping me involved to that level, is this organization helped Kentucky just in that.
Mm-hmm.
And nationally, I think we have we've turned the tide on anytime we beat an anti-bill. And when I first got involved, I mean, there was a lot more anti-bills winning than there are now. So every victory that we have to promote hunting, fishing, trapping, Second Amendment rights, and a legacy for our cultural heritage is a win. And it's hard to pick out one, but just playing defense is what I do best in my legislature and what we've done good on the national level.
How about you, Brian?
I don't know if there was any one thing you could, because we kind of do it as a group.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a group effort. That's the great thing about the EC and NASC is, Jeff's up in the Northeast. He's working, doing things within Rhode Island. Robin's in the Midwest. So you got on help West Virginians. But so it's kind of, as president, I guess I didn't look at it as being president. I was just part of the group.
Sure.
And one thing I did have, staff's wonderful. You're talking about it is, as a president, I had that aha moment. I think y'all made a PowerPoint slide and stuff for me. You may still have it. Hope you do. To get back to that Pittman Robertson talk when you go out to civic groups, and I did a couple of those and just raise hands if you got a hunting or fishing license. Very few would. And then just like, well, thank you for being a conservationist.
Yeah.
And then that got other people their interest sparked. And then we go into explaining the history of the North American model, how it all works. And they're like, oh, wow, we had no idea. We were clueless. So that was, something that was developed. But other than that, it's just, it's a fun group of men and women. It was a joy to lead it. And I was honored to do it. Putting the conventions together is a little work, but beyond that, that I guess that's the one thing probably as president that you are, it's like, okay, you got to navigate the ship of wherever it's going to go for the next annual meeting. So that's kind of the, but other than that, it didn't seem like work. It's fun.
Awesome.
It's just, when you do what you love, it's not work.
There you go.
Setting the agenda, that's something I forgot about. And Brian kind of jogged me on that. Is I still enjoy setting the agenda, because what's timely, what's important, what people need to hear, and that's very fluid. So I think the agenda of these meetings is very, very important.
Mr. President?
I mean, being in the position for a year now, I just look at, and being on the council the number of years I've been on, is where we are and where we're going. And we've got to a point where now we have all 50 states, but our work's not done.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2,600 plus members in the caucuses, legislators. And I look at it as we need to continue that growing and getting more folks involved, and to continue to grow that number of folks in caucuses. I look at one of the places we are now is, and I've said this a few times just in the past couple of days, is I think we're finally transitioning from defense and we're able to get to a little offense on legislation. And it's because of this group that we're able to do.
Yeah, and as we'll see tomorrow in our breakout session, so those stats are going to bear fruit there. You're going to see that, we're on the positive side of our wins, and in some cases 2-1, and that's great, because speaking for the Northeast, it's not a very friendly place to be with on these issues, and we are challenged constantly, much like the Northwest.
but we're on to them, and we know their strategy.
Yeah.
We study them. We can tell you what a seemingly innocuous bill is going to do to undermine your rights.
That's exactly right. Representative Goley, you just mentioned about the work continues and growing, and certainly challenges we see out in the field is continuing to build our state caucuses and getting good bipartisan co-chairs on there. It's important to have that. It communicates so many things, but it does become a challenge in certain areas. What's your I guess elevator pitch, or when you're talking to people at these meetings, how can we get more people to be involved and be active, not just a name on a roster?
It goes back to it. We've said it many times. We've said it over and over that the R's and D's are checked at the door when you come in, and that catches a lot of people. As we hear across the country, it gets more divisive. People are looking for an out of that and into something else that they can really be passionate about and gather with folks and actually talk about an issue that you're interested in. And even if you don't know anything about it, you're there to learn and listen. And the more you meet and the more you reach out and you talk to people, they become more involved. I host events when we host events and do a luncheon. We have the director of Fish and Game come, his staff come and talk policy issues. And the individuals that come to the luncheon don't hunt, don't fish, but they leave there thanking me for having them because they didn't know about it. And they, learned something from that, and they're looking forward to being more involved. So I think, by doing that, you get the message out to your colleagues.
Any thoughts there?
No, he's exactly right. I mean, you gotta educate those that don't know, and sometimes it's harder to educate those that think they know. Also, so you got a little bit on both sides there. So
basically, as legislators, because we think we know a lot.
Absolutely, and but once you get the overall mission is the outdoors. Who doesn't like the outdoors? And we're here to protect it and what's in it with and do things in a responsible, ethical manner for outdoors. And once they realize, oh, that's what you're doing, yeah, I like that. Yeah, so then you can get them in, and then you can educate them when the legislation comes up, and then you start building trust and relationships, and then it just kind of works itself.
What do you think about the strategy? And this is coming to me in real time as you're talking, because we always will say, engage with your local legislator. The onus becomes on the constituency and people in our community. I'm repetitive in this on the show. It takes very little to look up who your representative is, who's your state senator in your district. At least learn their names. And we always say, reach out to them, introduce yourself, get something out of them. But now I'm wondering if there's a strategy that, as caucus members, we try to recruit, as staff, we try to recruit and work with you guys. But I think it'd be an interesting wrinkle if our sportsmen's community, our rod and gun clubs, our fishing clubs, our shooting clubs, they started learning who's in their area, reach out to them and say, hey, it'd be really awesome if you were part of insert your state sportsman's caucus. It would speak a lot to us if you're not already. And hearing that from their voters, I think there's power in that.
I will say, and I've been trying to work my way around in New Hampshire on this issue, because I look at it, we had an issue come in with rabbit hunting and the dog training.
Oh, yes.
The catch of rabbits. And the only ones involved were those who were active with dogs. And I reached out to a couple of the other organizations out there, whether it be Trout Unlimited, whether it was the Trappers or any other group, and telling them that numbers count. While this issue may not affect you right now, it can snowball down to what you're really interested in. So all these groups, when a piece of legislation comes out attacking a certain sport industry or sport group, you all need to come together.
Mhm.
Because if you don't, once they get in and attack one group, they're not stopping there. It's going to be coming after the next group.
Mhm.
And so my biggest pet peeve with these organizations is don't get into a riffle, a rife, or any. You ought to all be out there working on the same issue.
Yeah.
Pro sportsmen.
There's not enough of us to eat each other, and Lord knows we
called
did.
the old divide and conquer, and planting the seed, and then watching that fracture. And it happens. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And as far as I think the caucuses themselves can foster those relationships. I've got a list of most of our stakeholders. It's hard to keep up with who's leading them. It's hard to keep that list current. So keep your list current. Get to your caucus chairs. We've had a couple sportsmen's days at the Capitol. I invite stakeholders to some of our caucus luncheons or informative sessions during the session to get them in at the Capitol, and there might be a lot of orange and camo a couple of days, and I've had governors that have actually supported that in the past, and that's just kind of nice to feel like they've got a say and skin in the game. But more and more with social media and the internet and the opportunity for misinformation, we've got a lot of division on certain issues that just a lot of them aren't even real, not real issues. Of course, some people are sitting back and taking great delight when they see sportsmen going at each other for those groups. So I think I've tried to mediate certain issues among sportsmen, had some limited success through the years, bringing them together in a closed setting and getting a resolution on a piece of legislation or regulation or a season or whatever the case may be. We've got to do more of that and less throwing rocks on the internet. Some things you usually don't know what you're talking about. Don't go to us as policy legislators. If I've got a bill, come to me and I will talk to you about that, the impact of that, the intention of that. And if I'm wrong, I'll change it, but do it with respect and do it civilly and with a positive dialogue if you're communicating with your electeds.
Yeah, there you get more milk, more results with honey than vinegar, right? The old saying there. No one likes being berated on email or voicemail.
And unfortunately, within politics now and the way they're doing divisiveness, we have a massive case of psychocirrhosis in America right now. It's bad. Everybody, that's the hardening of the mind. But it's, you just, with the social media, they'll throw anything out there, make it up, and people just, that it's real.
Yeah.
And the press does it too.
Sure.
If you've got some agenda-driven press out there, I had a bill last session. It's totally wrong. Instead of calling me, the bill sponsors, they put out these stories that they didn't even read the bill. They had no context or understanding of the bill.
That's because there's so many of these other nonprofit political groups that are out there churning stuff left and right. Well, the media now has to try to beat them to it, so they don't have good old days of the printing press where you could sit there and you could research it, you could interview people, you could actually write a good story. Now it's like I gotta get there first because whoever's first is set the tone.
You get those clicks.
And
it's true or not.
And even the standard is so low now that even if you're wrong, it's such a fast turn and burn that you're wrong, so what? And we're moving on.
That's right.
There's no accountability in that, which is unfortunate.
It's important. I mean, watching how these anti-groups work, it's amazing how a small number of individuals are very active and with Facebook or any of the Instagram or all that, make it look like there's a lot of them out there when we all know it's not in numbers. It's just in the way they are able to message.
And honestly, we could replicate that as well. Our community largely stays quiet. That's just I think that's who we are by nature. But if we employed some
work and hunt, other things and have lives too.
Yes, ma'am, I agree with you. But if we could find a way to replicate some of that, I think our voice would be amplified as well. To that point, and all your points, it kind of makes me think of the advisory council. Some states have them, some states don't. But I think there's value in that and working through that, because then that way you as a legislator, the lead's points can have a focused message coming from the constituency in your states, and if they can all agree on a few goals for that session, or if there's a couple things coming up that they're concerned about, it's a united single message. You're not hearing it, like you said, the chirping from all the different organizations. They're all going to prioritize what's important to them instead of the entirety of the community, and you're not losing your trappers and your houndsmen, and then the dominoes are falling.
You're exactly right, Fred. The advisory council is important because, I think it's our nature as outdoors folks to basically be quiet, because Fred, I don't want you to know where I caught those fish.
Yeah, that's right.
And Rob and I shot that big buck somewhere in the woods. But so I think we've always kind of, inherently that's who we are. Kind of like keep it close to the vest. But I think it's gotten to a point now where, we have to basically take the vest off a little bit and educate the people of what we're doing, how we're doing it. The rep, like I said, back to, it pays a lot of taxes. It employs a lot of people. That side's not known, and you can do it in a manner where you can do that. And that's where an advisory group comes in handy, because they're kind of speaking for you. Sure, not just one of those old stinking politicians out here, trying to sell me a load of.
Yeah.
It's so I think those are, and then you are building, expanding your base for items you may have or things they may want.
Very good. We're getting to it. I've taken up a bit of your time here, and I thank you for it. I want to leave you with the opportunity for some words of wisdom, parting thoughts, and we'll start with Senator Webb, please.
It's just stay diligent, stay aware. And if you're a legislator listening to this, don't rely on staff. Read the bills, talk to stakeholders, talk to affected parties, call us. I mean, like Jeff said, we've traveled in our capacities. I will still travel. Send me your legislation. And I will look at it. I will vet it. I will tell you what I think. I keep up. I spend way too much time on this, strategies, whether it's my horses or cattle or hunting and fishing. It's the same strategy, different subject matter. So be very aware of the legislation, and your sportsmen's groups have got to come together and be one voice, if you can, on what you can agree on, and help us work out what we can't agree on. But do it together in a manner that does not create a chink in the armor.
Brian?
Yeah, exactly right, Robin. And be persistent. I mean, don't, just because it doesn't happen, in the time frame you would like it to be, you're also dealing with government, which sometimes takes forever. And sometimes that's a good thing too. So just stay persistent, stay positive. Don't come in and, be angry and elevated. Like I said, the psychocirrhosis, don't come in open-minded, not hard-headed, and to a point of, hey, it's not going to be what's on a sheet of paper. It's going to change. And you may not get all of it today, but if you can get some of it, it's a victory. Like that is a victory, and move on. You slowed things down, you stopped it. And and those that are listening, whether you're, there's other ways to help this organization besides being an elected official. You can advisory committees, boards, whatever you're doing in your industry, the sporting society. There's a lot of different things now this organization has made available to folks to help keep the mission positive and keep the mission going. So that's what I would say is get involved. There's many ways to get involved, locally, nationally, but just get involved if you're passionate about it. There's those that want to take it away from you. We just want to make sure it's here.
Yeah, great. Rep. Goley.
I will say, for the sportsmen and women out there, be active. Don't think that somebody else is going to do it for you. I know as a legislator, when we have anti-hunting, anti-trapping bills, I get lots of emails and lots of phone calls from the other side, and not many from sportsmen and women. Being said, probably because they know where I stand on the issue, but it's still important to contact legislators. They want to hear from you. And, get out there, make that phone call. And for the legislators out there, we now have caucuses in all 50 states. Know who your co-chairs are, know who's in the organization, and if you need some research or any help on legislation, please reach out to staff here at NASC, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help you. And this is what this organization is all about.
Well said. Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. This is a wonderful conversation, and I hope folks will take it and share it around far and wide and get it to those folks who have the opportunity to make a difference. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again to my guests, Senator Webb, Representative Goley, Mr. White, for their time and going through all that in the great conversation. Takeaways. Nothing you guys haven't heard here, but it's nice to hear it from those folks, people that have been there since day one all the way up through today. Get involved. Towards the end there, you heard that. The history lesson is fantastic. It gives context to who we are, where we've been, where we want to go. But so many people in our community can grab so many of our issues by the throat and bring them to our co-chairs, to our caucus members, to the caucus itself, and work with these leaders to really get things, to right some ships in certain states, to get some good stuff over the finish line, highlight the stuff that's important. And it's not all doom and gloom. It's important to celebrate our caucus members when they advocate for good policy, for good legislation, and get that over the finish line. We are in totality a small segment hunting. We got a great angling community across this great country, and a very strong recreational shooting community. But we know our hunting community is waning and has been for years. So working amongst all of our friends, our colleagues, and our leadership at the state houses is how we can get good stuff happening and thwart ill-advised legislation that gets cropped up. And as we move into sessions opening, many this week, as you're hearing this podcast drop, it's vitally important to be involved. And the simplest thing you can do, here's that drum, I'm going to beat it. Look up who your local representation is. Send them an email. Hi, I'm so-and-so. Nice to meet you. Here's what is concerning me. Here's what I want to see happen. Can you champion some positive legislation for our state sportsmen and women? I want to help. It's not that time consuming, and it can mean so much. We got a lot going on. It's the start of a new year, and times are going to get busy. And then add to that little thing called an election. Gee whiz. For me, it's begun months ago, and now as we draw near to our first in the nation primary here in New Hampshire, and then you guys out in Iowa are going to have your deal going on first. We are days and weeks away from really kicking all this off. So, as people are trying to get elected, to get reelected, and obviously the huge national elections as well, it's going to be vitally important to be paying attention to what's going on in your backyard and at your state houses, because so much of the oxygen is going to get sucked out of all these rooms. Again, as people are trying to hold their seats, people are trying to come on board, and then the very loud and boisterous presidential campaign, governor's campaigns, Senate and congressman campaigns. There's just so much going on. So stay alert, stay tuned in, and you can get so much information by going to our website and staying in tune to what CSF has going on, what our staff is doing at your state capitals, listening to this publication, signing up for the EPUB of the Sportsman's Voice. Loads and loads and loads of resources at your very little fingertips. It's super convenient. And we will continue to update carryover policy from late 2023 as it advances, and keep you guys up to date on all of it. So welcome to 2024. Thanks for having us along. As we said in the last edition, 23 pieces of federal legislation were forwarded. Of those, we got two of those we own, and that's pretty fantastic. So that's not a terrible batting average as it pertains to what got over the finish line at the federal level. I don't know what that really says about the two bodies not getting a whole lot done in 2023, but of the things that got done, rest assured, CSF had a very mighty hand in moving and shaking and bringing folks to the table in a bipartisan way and getting stuff done for America's sportsmen and women. So I'll leave you all with that. Charging into a new year. Thanks so much for having us. Until next time, see you later. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, see you later.